Today we're going to review how to multiply two numbers that include a decimal place. You can also use this method to multiply a decimal by a whole number. So first we're going to look at the problem 7.3 times 2.5. First thing we need to do is ignore that decimal and multiply them just as if they were whole numbers. So now we will have 73 times 25. The next thing you're going to want to do is rewrite those numbers in expanded form, which means we're going to break it up into their place values. So 73 is 70 plus 3, and 25 is 20 plus 5. Then we're going to be using the box method to multiply these two numbers. So for the box method, you're going to need to decide how many rows and how many columns you need to use. In our case, our original problem had two place values each, so we're going to have two columns and two rows. Then we rewrite that expanded form down below, and we can start our multiplying. So 20 times 70 goes into the first box, that's 1400. 20 times 3 is 60, which goes into that second box. 5 times 70 is 350, and 5 times 3 is 15. What we need to do with each of those products is add them all together. So we'll have 1400 plus 350 plus 60 plus 15. I went ahead and used a calculator and found that this is equal to 1,825. But in our original problem, we had decimal places that we ignored, so now we need to put those back in. You need to count how many decimal places you have, and so for each of these we have one number that comes after the decimal place, which gives us two total numbers that come after the decimal place in our original problem. This will help us know how many times we need to move to the left from our imaginary decimal that always comes at the end of a whole number. So if I rewrite 1,825 and include that imaginary decimal at the end, I want to move it over 2 times to the left. That gives me a new answer of 18.25. So let's go ahead and look at a second problem. In this case, we have 0.33 times 0.52. I'm going to rewrite these numbers so I can get rid of that decimal. Now, if you have a problem like this that starts with 0, when you get rid of that decimal place, you can also get rid of that 0. So these two numbers will become 33 and 52. The next thing we need to do is turn those into expanded form. So 33 is represented by 30 plus 3, and 52 is represented by 50 plus 2. Now, once again, we are using the box method, so we can draw our box, and we have two places each for our two numbers, so we just need a 2 by 2 square. We can put our expanded forms down below, so 30 and 3 and 50 and 2, and start multiplying. So in our first box, we have 50 times 30, which gives us 1,500. We also have 50 times 3, which gives us 150. Then down below, 2 times 30, which is 60, and our final square is 2 times 3, which is 6. Now we can take all of those products and add them together. So we have 1,500 plus 150 plus 60 plus 6. Instead of using a calculator this time, I will write all of those numbers out to show you how to do it by hand. Just want to make sure that you line them all up correctly. So we have 6 and we have 11, so I carried my 1. 5 plus 1 plus 1 is 7, and drop down the 1. That gives me 1,716 as my answer. Obviously, that number is too big for this problem, so we need to figure out where our decimal place needs to go. In this case, we had 4 numbers that came after our decimal places in the original problem. That tells me that I'm going to move my imaginary decimal from my answer over to the left 4 times. So I'll rewrite 1,716, plug in that imaginary decimal, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that gives me an answer of 0.1716. So when you rewrite an answer like that starts with a decimal, it's always good to plug in the 0 at the beginning. For our last problem, we have 14.3 times 8.1. And we want to ignore that decimal place once again. So now that gives me 143 times 81. Now this one's a little bit different to write out in expanded form because now we have 100 as well. So we write it out as 100 plus 40 plus 3, and 81 just stays 80 plus 1. So now when we do our box method, we will either need to have 3 columns or 3 rows by 2 columns or 2 rows to be able to fit all of our expanded form. I went ahead and did 3 columns and 2 rows. So I write my 140 and my 3 above, and my 80 and my 1 on the side. Now I can multiply through. So 80 times 100 gives me 8,000. 8 times 40 gives me 3,200. 80 times 3 is 240. And my bottom column is very simple since it's times 1. So we have 100 times 1, 40 times 1, and 3 times 1. Now I can take all of those products and add them together. So 8,000 plus 3,200 plus 240 plus 100 plus 40 plus 3. Once again, I'm going to line those all up if I don't have my calculator to do it for me. And my final answer is 11,583. Once again, we can tell by estimating that this is way too big for our original problem of 14.3 times 8.1. So we need to count those decimal places. I have 2 numbers that come after my decimal point in my original problem. So when I go back down below, I can write in my imaginary decimal place at the end, go 2 times to the left, and that leaves me with 115.83 as my answer.